There is a lot of conflicting information currently out there on the S series of Panasonic cameras on how good is the autofocus for video. In today's video, hopefully I'm going to clear up that conflicting information. We've got the Panasonic 50mm 1.4, and we've also got the Sigma 50mm 1.4, and we're gonna be putting it to the ultimate autofocus test today. My name's Dustin, your video tour guide. Please keep your arms and legs inside your chairs at all times. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Before we go out and start shooting some tests, I do need to tell you what my autofocus settings are. If you watched my last video, I go over my top 10 secret settings inside the S1H, and one of the settings is you can customize the autofocus. I'm gonna be testing out continuous autofocus with human detect on. I'm also probably gonna do a little bit of testing with animals as well. And then we're also gonna try out the tracking as well. And we're gonna be using both lenses for this. Meet my buddy Tyler. He's going to be our subject matter today. For the first setup, I wanted to see how it would fare if I were shooting an interview. With the S Pro, it did a good job. I had Tyler talk with his hands, look different directions, move around a bit, and even look behind him to see what would happen. It was pretty rock solid in this type of situation, and it seemed to have very little, if any, focus breathing. When put up against the Sigma in this scenario, I was actually pretty surprised at how comparable it was. But when I zoom in and look at the background, you can see there is some focus breathing or a little more noticeable focus shifting. But in this setup, there wasn't much difference between the two. Now from here on out in the video, there's going to be a common theme when it comes to both lenses, surprisingly. Anytime I did a test where the camera was locked on a tripod but the subject was moving, the camera had a much more difficult time tracking my subject. As you can see, it would start off doing a decent job, but after a few seconds just could not keep up. The S Pro in most cases did a little bit better job than the Sigma, but not by much. Even just simple panning and following moves, it just had a real tough time following the subject. What I find most interesting is when you watch the viewfinder, the camera actually shows that it's tracking the subject, even telling me that it knows where their face and eye is, but for some reason it just doesn't stay focused on them. Now, because of what I was seeing in continuous autofocus, I wanted to see what kind of results I would get using the continuous tracking mode. From my tests, it actually did a little bit better job with both lenses at times, like this, where the camera was locked off, or panning and the subject was walking, with the S Pro doing a slightly better job. It wasn't rock solid though, and would really lose focus at times. For what I shoot as well, which is mostly run and gun type of shoots, using the tracking is not super ideal. I put the camera on my Ronin S and moved on to moving shots. For this type of situation, having a subject talk to camera while walking, the S Pro did a decent job, sometimes slightly losing focus but coming right back. And I got very comparable results with the Sigma, slightly losing focus sometimes but coming right back. Once I took the face out of the equation though, things got pretty dicey. As you can see, the camera really had no clue what to focus on. Now to be safe, I had Tyler take his hood off, but I got the same result. And it's possible you could tweak some things and you could get better results, but for these tests, I was testing the tracking and the continuous autofocus. With the Sigma, I got a lot of the same thing, really just having no clue what to focus on. I also did try the continuous tracking in this scenario, but I got the exact same result. Once I brought the face back into the picture though, things got much better, even from this side shot of the face. Both the S Pro and the Sigma performed basically identical, and from what I could see, there is little, if any, focus breathing. I took things to the next level and wanted to see how it would do if I was parallaxing around my subject as well as changing the distance from my subject. And it kind of left me confused because you would think from the panning shot where my subject was walking far from camera to near camera, I would get similar results, but I didn't. The S Pro would slightly lose focus at times, but for the most part did a decent job, and I would probably say this was a usable shot. Once I switched over to the Sigma though, I got a much different result. This was probably the only shot where I could really see the S Pro outshine the Sigma. I took the panning shot to the next level by moving towards Tyler and passing close to camera and then continuing to move away. The S Pro seemed to be slightly better than the Sigma, but at times I did get a similar result as the Sigma. Next we did some running. The S Pro seemed to be pretty solid all the way through with little or no breathing, with the Sigma being slightly worse and would lose focus at times. And again, once I took the face away, the camera just really had a hard time knowing what it should be focusing on. The S Pro in this scenario did a better job than the Sigma, as you can see. Now I briefly tested a few other things as well. When you're in manual focus on the S1H, there's an option on the screen to turn on autofocus and focus whatever area you set. The idea is to quickly grab focus on whatever your subject is and then pull manual from there. I got mixed results. At times it was fast and I could find focus pretty flawlessly, but at other times it would think it was focused on the area I set, but obviously wasn't, or it would hunt a little bit more than I would like. I was actually touching the focus button on that shot, but it thought it was in focus even though it was still focused on the background. I wanted to see how the autofocus would perform in a more controlled lighting environment, like if you were shooting an interview inside or on a set. I did a lot of the same moves, like rubbing my eyes, looking in a bunch of different directions, and even looking behind me to see what would happen. Now while you're watching, you might think it's doing a great job, but this is where the focus breathing was really noticeable, as you can see. And once I started to move forward and backwards more dramatically, it really showed how slow it can be to react to my movement. The Sigma was pretty comparable to the S Pro, and just being slightly slower to react to my movements. These moves are pretty dramatic and probably wouldn't happen while you were interviewing someone, but you never know. I decided to try the continuous tracking in this scenario as well to see if I'd get different results, which I did. What's most interesting is if you look real close, the focus breathing is gone, and the camera did a much better job reacting to my movements. But in my opinion, it was a more acceptable speed. Surprisingly, using the continuous tracking with the Sigma in this scenario, I got worse results. It would still find me and focus on me, but had a much harder time keeping up with my movements and finding me when I did move. I did dabble some with the continuous autofocus with animal detect on, and at times it would track and find my dog, but still was nothing really to be excited about. And the Sigma performing worse than the S Pro. I quickly shot some B-roll in continuous autofocus of various things in my house, as if I was getting detail shots at a wedding, and it did pretty decent. The big thing I noticed was if I was doing more of an arc around my subject, it tended to do a better job knowing where to focus. But if I was dollying or pushing forward or away from something, it wasn't so great. And if I was trying to rack from a subject to reveal my scene, it was pretty dicey. That being said, if I was shooting a wedding, a lot of this would be shot in slow motion, so I could probably get away with most shots being usable at some point. The big and final thing to talk about, my final thoughts. I have to be honest, when you compare the autofocus for video to a camera with phase detect or dual pixel autofocus, I'm kind of unimpressed with the S1H. With that being said though, I have actually shot a bike race as well as a wedding with the S1, not the S1H, using the autofocus. I shot both of them with the 24-105 f4, and when I did shoot those, I remember it actually doing an okay job. There were times in both shoots where I was fighting the focus, where things would totally go out of focus, but after doing these tests, it confuses me a little bit because of my experience with the S1, which makes me wonder, maybe the autofocus does a little bit better job in real-world scenarios. But when you stress it to the more rare extreme tests, it shows where the autofocus needs improvement. The times the S1H does the best with both the S Pro and the Sigma is when your subject stays relatively in the same spot or if you maintain about the same distance away from them. Once you get into tracking your subject, things get pretty dicey with both the Sigma and the S Pro, but the S Pro did seem to perform slightly better. Now I shot all of these tests at a 1.4, which is super shallow, so potentially if you closed your iris some more, you could get better results, which is maybe why I had a better experience shooting that wedding and the bike race, since I could only go as low as an f4. Regardless of the f-stop you choose, you will still most likely experience the things you saw. You're just giving your camera a better chance to give the illusion it's still in focus since more is in focus. I also did not mess around too much with the custom focus settings. My settings, like I mentioned, were turned up all the way. I have read and seen videos mentioning if you turn it down all the way, it seemed to help with the focus breathing, and I'm actually shooting this video with it turned all the way down in autofocus. So let me know. Hopefully it's still in focus. I have no clue. This is where you should take everything I say though with a grain of salt and perform your own tests and form your own opinion, because depending on what kind of camera you come from, your experience may be different from mine. Just know what you're getting into with the autofocus if you plan on purchasing one of the S series of cameras. Now I haven't tested it for photos, but contrast detect focus systems tend to do really well for photos. For video though, you most likely will have to fight it or go in manual at times. If you do have to to go manual, realize there are tools built into the camera to help with focus, like focus peaking, as well as gear out there to help pull focus yourself, like the Ronin S paired with the focus motor and the focus wheel, which is what I do. In my opinion, do not buy the S1H if it is your first camera. The reason that I purchased the S1H is because it has a plethora of advanced features that not only come on cinema-like cameras, but the quality and colors the S1H can produce are unlike anything other cameras can do on the market at its price point. And if this is your first camera, all the features can be overwhelming and get you discouraged and you end up selling it. Now, I come from an A7 III that has incredible autofocus, but I also shoot a lot on reds by myself. So I was comfortable investing in the S1H and realizing I may have to manually pull myself on top of dialing in all my other settings on the go. What it all comes down to is what is most important to you and what kind of shoots and videos you are going to be producing the most, then determining what tool is best for your scenario. That's all cameras are just tools with strengths and weaknesses that serve different purposes for different needs. Maybe one day we'll get a perfect camera. That's all I have for this video though. By the way, thank you guys so much for subscribing. I really mean that. We've passed over 100 subscribers in only 2 weeks, and I cannot thank you enough. And I'm super excited to continue to grow with you all. To celebrate, if you want to support the channel, I have Happy Filming t-shirts available for purchase, and hopefully in the next video I will be wearing one so you can see it. If you found this video helpful, be sure to give it a double thumbs up. And I've already got more videos in the works, so make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell button if you want to be notified when I upload those videos. But in the meantime, happy filming.
It was moments ago that we arrived on the scene here at Perpendicular Park to find a series of people huddled across the edge of the water here, because we're next to a lake, where they were fighting each other in a battle royale sort of combat, reenacting Fortnite. We had people jumping from school buses and landing on the ground, breaking both kneecaps in the process. More from this at 11.